Hello and welcome back to Crushing Comics, the show where I fall in love with my comic book collection all over again by unwrapping them book by book after they've been packed quite carefully for a round-the-world move. You know, in the past two episodes we've opened up some Chris Claremont Uncanny X-Men, and I always credit Chris Claremont's writing to partially my SAT score and my vocabulary and success with using vocabulary in life. That guy did not hold back in terms of vocabulary for kids. I mean, he had his words that we joke about, like him saying that people were nigh and vulnerable. But I mean, he wrote X-Men as if it was challenging literature, and he didn't care if it was at a certain reading level or not. And I think that's really interesting because I don't think that comics are necessarily... I've talked recently about how I think comics today are written largely for adults at Marvel and DC, but they don't necessarily have that pedigree, and part of it is the decline of the narration box concept. There's this idea now that comics need to show you exactly what's happening. Like, the art has progressed so far that you're supposed to just stand out of the way of the art and just let the art showcase what it's supposed to showcase without saying it was a dark and stormy night or she was nigh unvulnerable when she was blasting, right? But that's taken away part of the authorial voice of comics, and people talk about now how artists aren't important and Marvel tries to sell all of their comic books based on the writers, but you can't change that the whole nature of the medium has shifted more towards the art because you don't have authors writing like this full-text narration the way that Claremont did, the way that Alan Moore did, even Watchmen. You just don't have it. And so it's a very different relationship with the art, but it also means that we don't have the chance to get this great vocabulary unless you have some characters known as a major brain. But the other impact for me was that, like, I didn't necessarily know how to say the words. I was just reading them in comic books. I was never hearing them. And so I have a long and storied history of not knowing how to say the fancy words that I know how to write. And my wife is very kind, but she, for whatever reason, knows what the words are and how to say them. And she's always gently correcting me. Probably like 8 times today that's happened. Even after being corrected, because in my head, I just know the words like the way that they're written on the page. Ooh, still wrapped. Oh, hey! It is the X-Men Age of Apocalypse companion. How about that? So, okay, here's the thing. This is one of those, like, I got a problem with this one. The Age of Apocalypse, as it was originally conceived, has its start and end point. And this is really emphasized by the nature of the way that they've collected the information in the Age of Apocalypse Omnibus. It starts from the start point where Xavier is shot in the past when he's serving in the military areas in Israel with Magneto, and it ends when the McCran crystal kind of takes over that reality and a couple key things are changed, and it allows the main X-Men reality to be rebooted. In my mind, that shuts down the Age of Apocalypse as an alternate reality that you can go to or travel to. It's frozen in time and space. And the four characters make it out and to the main X-Men universe. It's Sugarman, Dark Beast, X-Man, and I want to say Holocaust. And that's it, right? That's supposed to be all she wrote. But Marvel, when they have a good thing, they cannot resist going back for more. And that's part of what this represents. So it does have the stories from Age of Apocalypse that didn't quite fit into this original omnibus. So that's those X-Men Chronicles issues, which I seriously enthused about because I love them, and they give background that's before the present day of this omnibus, so it doesn't fit into the scope of them. And also, does it have the X-Universe issues? I might have mistaken. Yeah, it does have the X-Universe issues. So those 4 issues are from the original time of Age of Apocalypse. But then it starts collecting things that happened after Age of Apocalypse, one of which is the Blink Miniseries. Now, it was patterned in a 4-issue fashion, just like all of the original Age of Apocalypse series, but it was written after the Age of Apocalypse series. And as somebody recently pointed out to me, it was really kind of like a promo and tie-in more to Blink starring in Exiles, which was Marvel inventing this kind of cross-reality team, which is the time that it really became real that Age of Apocalypse was a reality that people could be plucked from and that ultimately even could be returned to. And so then, as a 10-year anniversary of Age of Apocalypse, Marvel did a 6-issue limited series, which was written by, now we know, Marvel's new editor-in-chief, C.B. Cebulski, although at the time he was writing under his Japanese pseudonym, and that is not well received. Let me tell you, I pay attention to what X-Men fans say online because I don't like to just think that like my opinion counts for all. I have clearly some strong opinions about a lot of these books, and sometimes they really tend to be in the opposite direction of the opinions of the fan community. I have never once seen anybody say one nice thing about that 10-year anniversary series. So this collects a couple other like later revisits, an Hulk Broken Worlds, some X-Men annual stuff, but ultimately I bought it because it has those remaining 4 issues from Age of Apocalypse. Again, an example of me spending, this retailed for $99 US, so I probably got it for $50. Me spending $50 for an oversized version of 10 issues, but it has some other stuff too that's not going to be collected elsewhere. Now, Marvel did ultimately do a paperback reissue of Age of Apocalypse that was patterned after the way that it was collected in these books, and it has like an Age of Apocalypse kind of aftermath trade paperback. That's not what it's called, but it's like after the fall or Omega or one of those words that has all this stuff, so you don't need the companion omnibus to get it. Now, ultimately, Marvel actually long-term reawakened the Age of Apocalypse because Rick Remender brought it back in his Uncanny X-Force. There's an omnibus we haven't opened yet. His Uncanny X-Force run to great effect during the Dark Angel saga, and spinning out of that actually was a whole series set in the Age of Apocalypse, which now is like this full-fledged reality that people can travel back and forth from, although then eventually it gets put a definitive end to with the Exterminators crossover between Age of Apocalypse, Extreme X-Men, and Astonishing X-Men. That was right around the period of Marvel Now. Now, does that mean it's really gone? Who knows? Because Marvel kind of reset the whole multiversal fabric with Secret Wars in 2015, so they could easily say that any of these alternate universes back and ultimately bring back the characters from them. I don't know how interesting that is. Like, Uncanny X-Force brought back Nightcrawler from this universe, who was like this much killier, stabbier Nightcrawler, and it's like, do we need 2 Nightcrawlers, 2 Icemen, 2 Wolverines? 8 Wolverines, as the case may be. I just don't typically think that's the case. So this kind of, for me, represents both the best and the worst of the Age of Apocalypse, because it's got that great background and wider universe material from the original series, and I think it fleshed out the world so much, but then I don't think the world really needed any going back to, but there's no such thing as a world that comic books won't go back to. I briefly mentioned Watchmen as I gave an introduction, and, you know, as I speak, DC is actually integrating Watchmen into the DC universe with Doomsday Clock, so there's really nothing that's sacred, and everything in comics, at least at Marvel and DC, eventually will get revived, and this shows some of the revivals of the Age of Apocalypse. So that is the X-Men Age of Apocalypse companion, still in the plastic because I have a lot of it in single issues and I've read some of it in digital, some of it I've never read before. And now it is time for its ceremonial shelving. I don't know if there's enough room for it next to its partner here. We'll put it on the next shelf. Thanks so much for tuning in as we've unwrapped another book. Please tune in next time for more Crushing Comics, and thanks so much for watching. Take care.